I think Days of Our Lives might be setting us up for something much bigger than it first appears. And honestly, this whole Stefano twist doesn't feel like it's just about a will or a codicil. It feels personal, unfinished, even a little haunting. When I look at Marlena Evans being named as a surprise beneficiary by Stefano DiMera, I don't see it as just another DiMera power move. To me, it feels like Stefano reaching out from beyond the grave, almost insisting that Marlena confront something she never fully understood about their past. And that's where it gets interesting. I was really struck by that moment with Abe Carver talking to Theo Carver. The way Abe quickly clarified that Stefano and Marlena never had a child. I don't know, it felt a little too deliberate. Soap operas don't usually emphasize something like that unless they're planning to undo it later. Maybe I'm wrong, but it made me wonder if the show is quietly planting the seed for a massive retcon. The idea of a secret child between Marlena and Stefano actually fits the show's history perfectly. This is Salem. Memory loss, brainwashing, stolen embryos, presumed deaths. It's practically tradition at this point. I didn't realize how many gaps there are in Marlena's timeline, especially back in the 80s when she was presumed dead. That alone opens the door to so many possibilities. I keep thinking, what if Marlena did have Stefano's child and simply doesn't remember? Or maybe someone else carried the baby without her consent. Both scenarios feel very Days, and honestly, neither would surprise me. And if that's where this is going, it would explain why Stefano's unfinished business with Marlena still matters. Not revenge, not obsession, but legacy. It also comes at a time when Marlena is emotionally vulnerable after losing John Black. I can't help but feel like the writers might use this twist as a way to give her something unexpected, something life-changing to hold on to. A long-lost son or daughter showing up now would completely turn her world upside down, but it might also give her a new sense of purpose. At the same time, I wonder if this would reopen old wounds rather than heal them. Because if Stefano manipulated her yet again, even from the past, that's not closure. That's another layer of trauma. So to me, this doesn't just feel like a shocking reveal in the making. It feels like a deeply emotional storyline about identity, memory, and control, wrapped in classic DiMera chaos. And knowing this show, if they're even hinting at another hidden DiMera, chances are they're not hinting for no reason. I think this episode really leans into that classic slow burn dread mixed with chaos that Days of Our Lives does so well. From my perspective, Chanel's storyline is the emotional core here. I was honestly expecting her to keep dodging the truth a bit longer, but the way it comes out, interrupted, delayed, and then finally admitted, feels painfully real. To me, the moment she tells Johnny that the lump might be cancerous hits harder because of that buildup. It's not dramatic in a loud way, it's heavy in a quiet, unavoidable way. And I was wondering if this is setting up a long-term health arc rather than a quick scare, because soaps rarely introduce something like this without going deep. Meanwhile, the whole situation with EJ, Kristen, and Kat feels almost darkly comedic in tone. I didn't realize how far Kristen would go in terms of anticipation, literally positioning herself to witness EJ getting the news of Johnny's death. That's next level even for her. And then her reaction, casually asking if he's dead. It's so cold it almost loops back into being absurd. I think the writers are leaning into her unpredictability again, which makes every scene she's in feel tense. EJ's reaction, though, is interesting to me. His relief at seeing Johnny alive is genuine, but it's quickly overshadowed by the DiMera blame game. The word Byzantine actually fits perfectly. The whole Sophia plot sounds overly complicated, even by soap standards. I kind of get Kristen's sarcastic point. Like, was all that really necessary? But at the same time, that overcomplication is very on brand for this show. The Sophia twist with the river discovery definitely shifts things into darker territory. When Jada orders the river to be dragged, I had the feeling the show is either setting up a fake-out death or a major reveal later. It's rarely that straightforward. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like there's more to uncover there. Leo and Javi's scenes, though, felt very different, almost grounded compared to everything else. Leo making it about himself is frustrating, but also very Leo. I think what stood out to me was Javi asking for distance. That's not something we usually see in these emotional confrontations. And Sarah's quiet reassurance, it gets easier, felt like one of the few genuinely gentle moments in the episode. As for Kat and Rafe, I was kind of thinking the same thing Rafe was. Why did she need to go over in person? That whole interaction screams unresolved tension. I don't fully buy Kat's "just doing my job" explanation, and I suspect the show doesn't expect us to either. And Alex, honestly, I feel like we all saw that coming. The setup has been there for a while, and even though it might cost him his marriage, it feels like he's heading straight into it anyway. Classic soap self-sabotage. Overall, I think this episode balances emotional weight with over-the-top plotting in a way that feels very true to the show. Messy, dramatic, and just unpredictable enough to keep you guessing. I think it's almost impossible to hear the name Allison Sweeney without immediately thinking of Days of Our Lives and, of course, Sammy Brady. Even though she's built a whole second act as a Hallmark star, to me she'll always be tied to that chaotic, unforgettable Salem schemer she's been playing, on and off, since 1993. And honestly, it still feels like she never really left. What surprised me, though, is realizing that her history with the show actually goes back even further. 3 years before Sammy ever showed up, Sweeney had already stepped into Salem in a completely different role. On May 4th, she appeared as a young Adrienne Johnson, not replacing Judy Evans, but playing a child version of the character in flashbacks. It's kind of wild to think her connection to the show started that early, almost like she was always meant to be part of that world. Then time did what it always does. I was thinking about how she branched out, even landing a role on the short-lived sitcom Family Man, before eventually circling back to Salem. And when she returned, it wasn't as that small flashback character. It was as Sammy, fully formed and dramatically aged up thanks to soap opera magic. The whole SORAS thing still fascinates me. 1 minute a kid, the next minute stirring up chaos. I remember her reflecting on those early days in a 2023 interview with Kelly Clarkson, saying she was just this dopey kid. And maybe she was, but to me, she was clearly a talented one. You don't stay that long on a show like Days unless you bring something special. It's kind of touching to think about how the cast and crew literally watched her grow up on set. And then there's Judy Evans, who's had her own incredible run. She originated Adrienne back in 1986, and in a very soap opera twist of fate, now plays Adrienne's lookalike, Bonnie Lockhart. I always find that kind of dual role legacy so uniquely Days, like the show itself refuses to let go of its history, just reshaping it in new ways. Maybe I'm wrong, but it really feels like Allison Sweeney's story with Days of Our Lives isn't just about one iconic character. It's about growing up inside a show, becoming part of its DNA, and somehow always finding your way back to Salem. I think this preview is setting up something a lot more emotionally complicated than it first appears. On the surface, it looks like a simple surprise baby storyline, but the tone shifts in those small moments feel intentional, almost like the show is hinting that not everything about Joy's return is as straightforward as she wants it to seem. To me, Joy coming back to Salem with a baby and immediately telling Alex he's the father feels a little too convenient, especially given everything he's dealing with right now, particularly with Stephani still reeling from her trauma. The timing alone makes me wonder if we're supposed to question it. I didn't realize how much that contrast matters until seeing this preview. Joy is soft, warm, and almost dreamy with Kelsey, while Alex looks guarded, maybe even suspicious. That phone call really stood out to me. Joy goes from calm and affectionate to visibly irritated, and then quickly pulls herself back together. I was wondering if that moment is a clue. Maybe someone knows more about the baby, or there's pressure on her that we haven't seen yet. It doesn't feel like a random interruption. It feels like something that could unravel her story. Then there's the shift at the Brady pub. Joy walks in hopeful, almost like she believes this is the moment Alex will step into this new reality with her. But his reaction is cautious at best. To me, his skepticism isn't just about shock. It feels deeper, like he's already questioning the situation. And honestly, I can't blame him. A surprise child dropped into his life during an already chaotic time, that's a lot to process. I think the biggest turning point in this preview is Joy's expression change. She goes from hopeful to hurt pretty quickly, which makes me think Alex either directly questions the baby's paternity or says something that challenges her version of events. It could even be that he's asking for proof, which would definitely explain the tension. At the same time, I wonder if the show is setting up a bigger twist. Maybe I'm wrong, but it almost feels like we're being nudged to doubt Joy, not necessarily in a villainous way, but in a there's more to this story kind of way. Soap operas love these layered reveals, and this has all the ingredients: a mysterious phone call, emotional whiplash, and a baby whose identity might not be as certain as claimed. Either way, I think this Brady pub scene is going to be less about bonding and more about confrontation. And if Alex does start questioning things now, it could open the door to a much bigger fallout, especially once Stephani inevitably gets pulled into the situation. I think this episode of Days of Our Lives on May 5th is shaping up to be one of those emotionally tangled, morally messy chapters where nobody really comes out looking great. I was especially struck by how Jada Hunter ends up carrying the burden of telling Amy Choi the devastating truth about Sophia Choi. The situation feels almost unbearably cruel, not just because of what happened, but because of how calculated it all was. Kristen DiMera manipulating events, staging a suicide. It's the kind of twist that makes me wonder how far the show is willing to push its villains this time. And I didn't realize until now just how much emotional weight Jada would have to carry in all this. She's not just delivering news, she's essentially shattering a mother's world. At the same time, there's this very different but equally complicated tension with Alex Kyriakis, Joy Wesley, and baby Kelsey. I was wondering if Alex's sudden certainty about fatherhood is coming more from emotion than fact. To me, it feels rushed, like he's already building a future in his head and trying to anchor Joy to Salem before reality fully sets in. His plea for her to stay almost feels less like love and more like panic. Then there's Stephani Johnson, who I think might be the most quietly honest person in this whole situation. Her confiding in Julie Williams about not wanting to be an instant stepmother, especially under these circumstances, actually felt very real to me. I didn't get the sense she's being cruel, just overwhelmed. And honestly, given everything she's dealing with, her hesitation makes sense. Still, I can't help but think this is going to create a major fracture in her relationship with Alex. The younger group, Holly Jonas, Tate Black, and Ari Horton, reacting to Sophia's fate was uncomfortable in a different way. I think the fact that they immediately start trying to justify their behavior says a lot. Maybe I'm wrong, but it didn't come off as guilt at first, more like self-preservation. That she was asking for it mindset feels like something the show is deliberately highlighting, and I'm curious if it's building toward a bigger reckoning for them. And then we have Gabby Hernandez and Philip Kyriakis, which to me looks like a slow-burning disaster in the making. Mixing business with a fragile personal dynamic rarely ends well in Salem. Gabby aligning Gabby Cheek with Titan should be a power move, but Philip stepping in with personal advice? That feels like a ticking time bomb. Especially since, right now, Gabby seems to have the upper hand professionally, and I don't see Philip handling that imbalance gracefully for long. Overall, I think this episode leans heavily into consequences: emotional, moral, and relational. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it feels like multiple storylines are heading toward a breaking point at the same time. I think this whole situation on Days of Our Lives just flipped Alex's world upside down in the most classic soap way possible. And honestly, I'm still processing how fast it all escalated. I was struck by how Joy didn't even try to ease into it. She just showed up, went straight to Alex, and dropped the kind of bombshell that changes everything. A daughter he never knew existed. No build-up, no warning, just, here's your child. To me, that boldness either means she's completely certain or she's hiding something. When Alex Kyriakis started talking in that Salem confessional, I felt like he was trying to convince himself to stay calm more than anything else. He kept things light, almost joking, but underneath it, you could see the cracks forming. His life was stable, new marriage, things going well, and then suddenly everything got complicated. And I didn't miss the way he kept circling back to Joy's past. The fact that she's an actress, that she's good at playing pretend, that didn't sound like a random observation. It felt like doubt creeping in. Maybe I'm wrong, but it really seemed like he's not fully buying her story yet. At the same time, the timeline does make things messy. He even admitted it wasn't impossible, especially during that break with Stephani Johnson. That's what makes this so uncomfortable. There's just enough truth there to make the situation believable. What really got me, though, was how he kept thinking about Stephani. While he's dealing with this life-altering news, she's off trying to rebuild herself after trauma. And now this? It's like the worst possible timing. I think he genuinely doesn't want to hurt her, which makes the whole situation even more tense. And then there's the name. Kelsey Kyriakis. The fact that he said it out loud, almost testing it, I don't know, that felt important. Like part of him is already imagining that this could be real. But at the end of it, he grounded himself in the only thing he can control: finding the truth. A paternity test. Facts over emotions. That tells me he's not ready to fully accept or reject this yet. He's stuck in that uncomfortable middle space. If I had to guess, I'd say this storyline is just getting started. Either this is going to pull Alex deeper into fatherhood than he ever expected, or it's setting up a much bigger twist involving Joy. And knowing soaps, I wouldn't rule anything out. I was watching the May 4th episode of Days of Our Lives, and honestly, I couldn't help but shake my head at how Kristen's whole plan unraveled. I mean, she had everything lined up. She even handed Sophia the gun and gave her clear instructions to kill Johnny. Simple, direct, effective. But no, Sophia had to get creative. I was sitting there thinking, why overcomplicate it? Instead of just pulling the trigger, she goes for this dramatic setup with candles, fire, and explosive gas, like she's auditioning for some over-the-top villain role. And then she actually tells Kristen the job is done. At that point, I almost felt like Kristen's reaction was inevitable. She knocks Sophia out, dumps her in the Salem River, and moves on, only to realize Johnny is still very much alive. That's the kind of twist that makes you laugh and cringe at the same time. And the real kicker? EJ isn't suffering the way Kristen wanted. And to me, that's the core of all this. It's not just about Johnny. It's about making EJ feel pain, real, lasting pain. Kristen doesn't strike me as someone who lets that go easily. I don't think she's done. Not even close. If anything, this failure probably pushes her to get more personally involved. And honestly, I was wondering if the show is setting up something even darker, because Kristen already has the perfect pawn right under her nose: Rachel. We've seen what Rachel is capable of. If Kristen could manipulate her into sabotaging every woman Brady cared about, then convincing her to go after Johnny doesn't feel like that big of a leap. It's unsettling, but also very on brand for this storyline. And here's where it gets really twisted. I think Kristen might actually benefit from Rachel being the one to do it. Imagine Rachel pulls the trigger, Johnny dies, and EJ immediately points fingers. Kristen would flip the narrative in a heartbeat, acting outraged that anyone would accuse her precious daughter. She'd turn herself into the victim while still getting exactly what she wanted. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like the kind of chaotic, morally upside-down move this show thrives on. And honestly, that's what keeps me watching. The sense that no plan ever goes smoothly, and when it fails, it somehow leads to something even more outrageous. I think this storyline is either about to get brilliantly twisted or dangerously messy. And knowing Days of Our Lives, it could honestly go either way. From my perspective, the moment Stefano DiMera's will comes into play, it never stays simple. I was already raising an eyebrow when Marlena Evans showed up as a beneficiary again, because to me, that connection has always been less about love. What really made me pause, though, is Theo Carver being named executor through a codicil that EJ DiMera just uncovered. I was wondering why Theo, of all people, would be placed in that position. It feels intentional, like Stefano is still orchestrating things from beyond the grave, choosing someone slightly removed from the core DiMera chaos to carry out something very specific. And then there's the part that, honestly, feels like it could change everything, or completely rewrite history. The idea that Stefano and Marlena might have had a child? I didn't realize the show might go that far. If this turns out to be true, it's not just a twist, it's a full-on retcon of decades of storytelling. When Abe Carver brought up Celeste Perot and suggested she, and not Marlena, was Stefano's true love, I thought that was the show grounding itself in established history. After all, Celeste and Stefano had Lexi Carver, which gave that relationship real emotional weight. But now I'm thinking, what if that wasn't the full story? With someone like Dr. Wilhelm Rolf involved, I think the writers have a built-in excuse to bend reality however they want. Secret pregnancies, memory tampering, embryo transfers. I mean, nothing is really off the table in this universe. So if they do reveal a maternity twist, switching the identity of a known character's mother, it wouldn't even feel out of place, just shocking. I was also wondering about EJ's role in all this. The way he's encouraging Marlena to attend the will reading, especially after their hypnotherapy discussions about Cat Green and the Italian hospital, makes me question whether he knows more than he's letting on. Either he's completely in the dark, or he's subtly steering Marlena toward a reveal he already expects. To me, the most interesting part is that Marlena isn't entirely rattled. She's been through Stefano's final games before. The man has died more times than anyone can count, and every time there's another layer, another manipulation, another secret waiting to surface. So I think the real question isn't if Stefano is still controlling the narrative, it's how far the writers are willing to go this time. Because if they actually rewrite maternity instead of paternity, that's not just a twist. That's a statement. I think this theory is fun, but it's also doing a lot of heavy lifting, even by Days of Our Lives standards. Let me walk through it the way I'd frame it in a YouTube-style analysis, keeping that speculative tone grounded. I was wondering if the show is deliberately nudging us towards something big with Stefano DiMera, Marlena Evans, and Chad DiMera. Because the dialogue you mentioned doesn't feel random. When Abe Carver and Theo Carver bring up Stefano having a child with Celeste Perot, but not Marlena, and then the scene immediately shifts to Chad and Marlena, I didn't think that was accidental. To me, it feels like classic soap foreshadowing, subtle enough to ignore, but deliberate enough to matter later. That said, the idea that Chad is secretly Marlena's son? I think it's possible, but it comes with complications. We already know Chad's history was rewritten once. He entered Salem as the son of Madeline Peterson Woods and Charles Woods, only for that to unravel into the truth that Stefano was his biological father. So the show has already proven it's willing to retcon Chad's origins. And because Chad wasn't born on screen, there's flexibility there. The writers could absolutely pivot again if they wanted to. Where I start to question things is Marlena's side of the story. For this twist to work, we'd have to believe that Stefano somehow impregnated Marlena without her knowledge, and that she either carried a pregnancy to term or had genetic material taken from her, all without remembering it. Now, to be fair, this is where Dr. Wilhelm Rolf enters the conversation, and suddenly the impossible starts to feel slightly more possible. I mean, this is the same man who created Rex Brady and Cassie Brady using stolen DNA, manipulated pregnancies, and blurred every ethical boundary imaginable. We've also seen embryo transfers, late-in-life pregnancies, and even near cloning attempts tied back to him. So I can see two versions of this theory. One, the darker route. Marlena was drugged, controlled, and unknowingly carried Stefano's child. Or two, the more science experiment version. Rolf created an embryo using Stefano and Marlena, then had it carried by Madeline. Between those two, I think the second option feels more in line with how the show handles these reveals today. The first one gets very dark, even for a soap that's explored mind control and possession. But here's the bigger question I keep coming back to. What does this twist actually add? If Chad becomes Marlena's son, it would tie him even deeper into the core families of Salem. It would also give Marlena a biological connection to the DiMera legacy in a way she never had before, which is kind of poetic considering her long history with Stefano. At the same time, though, it risks rewriting decades of emotional history. Chad's identity, his relationship with the DiMeras, and Marlena's own story would all shift in a pretty massive way. So I think we might be heading toward a will-reading shocker, but I'm not fully convinced it's this specific twist. If I had to guess, I'd say the show is planting seeds for a reveal connected to Stefano's legacy. Maybe another hidden child, or some long-buried secret involving Marlena, but not necessarily rewriting Chad again. Still, I could be wrong. And if there's one thing Days of Our Lives has proven over the years, it's that no history is ever completely locked in. And honestly, that's exactly what makes theories like this so hard to dismiss. I think this preview is leaning hard into suspense and psychological twists. And honestly, it feels like one of those weeks where nothing is quite what it seems. Right from the start, the situation with Jada Hunter and Amy Choi sets a grim tone. I was wondering if the show might finally confirm Sophia Choi's fate, but instead it looks like they're dragging us into uncertainty. The idea that the blood could match Sophia feels deliberately vague to me, like the writers want us to believe the worst without actually proving it yet. Then there's the emotional fallout with Alex Kyriakis and Joy Wesley. I didn't realize how quickly this baby storyline would escalate, but it's clearly about to explode. Alex wanting Joy to stay in Salem makes sense from his perspective, but I have to say, this feels like a direct threat to his marriage with Stephani Johnson. To me, the real drama isn't just the baby, it's how Stephani reacts when everything becomes real. On the DiMera side, things look as chaotic as ever. E.J. DiMera accusing Kristen DiMera of sending Sophia to kill Johnny DiMera feels like classic DiMera infighting. Everyone pointing fingers while hiding their own secrets. I think both E.J. and Kristen are playing dangerous games here, especially considering Kristen already interfered once to protect Sophia. That detail makes me think there's more truth buried under E.J.'s accusations than either of them want to admit. The return of Tony DiMera and Anna DiMera adds another layer. I always feel like Anna brings a kind of sharp honesty that cuts through the usual DiMera drama, and her reaction to being home says a lot. With Stefano DiMera's will involved, I think we're heading into a power struggle that could reshape the family dynamic again. And then there's that final moment with Kristen and Sophia. I have to be honest, I don't fully buy that Sophia is actually alive and standing there. The bloody ghost vibe feels intentional. It could be a hallucination, a nightmare, or even Kristen's guilt manifesting. But at the same time, this is days, so I may be wrong. People survive the impossible all the time in Salem. Overall, I think this week is less about clear answers and more about tension, suspicion, and emotional fallout. The biggest question to me isn't just whether Sophia is alive. It's what really happened to her, and who's actually responsible. I think this upcoming week in Days of Our Lives, May 4th to 8th, 2026, feels like one of those turning points where every secret starts colliding at once and nobody really walks away untouched. To me, Kristen DiMera is once again at the center of the storm. I didn't realize just how far she might go this time until I looked at what she's done to protect her daughter. She isn't just reacting anymore. She feels dangerous in a very calculated way. Sophia trusted her, believing she was being led into some kind of new beginning. But I was wondering if that was ever really the intention. Instead, it seems Kristen may have crossed a line that can't easily be undone. What really stands out this week is Jada finding blood at the exact place where Kristen struck Sophia. That detail alone feels heavy. I think it pushes everything into a new direction, especially when the question of whether the blood matches Sophia comes into play. If it does, then the emotional fallout for Amy could be devastating. I can almost imagine that moment where the truth is spoken out loud and everything changes in an instant. Meanwhile, Kristen continues to deny everything, even as EJ presses her about whether she had any role in Sophia's disturbing plot involving Johnny. I feel like she's playing a long game here, staying just ahead of every accusation, waiting for something bigger, like the will reading, to shift the balance in her favor. I might be wrong, but it feels like she believes she can still control how this all ends.
On another emotional level, Chanel is carrying something much heavier inside than she lets on. I didn't expect her to hold it together for so long, but it becomes clear she's reaching her limit. Supporting Johnny after everything he's been through is already difficult, but then she finally breaks down and reveals that her mammogram results suggest the lump could be malignant. To me, that changes the entire emotional tone of their relationship this week. Johnny himself is barely holding things together. I think he's been living in a constant state of fear ever since this pregnancy situation escalated, and now with Chanel's news, he needs somewhere to put all that anxiety. His conversation with Marlena feels like a turning point. She tries to stay hopeful, reminding him that catching it early is a blessing, but I didn't realize how hollow hope can feel when you're in the middle of it. Even as Johnny and Chanel try to support each other, there's this quiet sense that something bigger is still coming, especially with that will reading looming in the background. I get the feeling it could shift alliances, emotions, and maybe even relationships in ways nobody is ready for. Elsewhere, Stephani confides in Jada about Joy's unexpected return. I think the twist with Joy arriving back in Salem with Alex's baby girl adds a whole new layer of complication. It doesn't just bring drama, it redefines family lines in real time. And when Alex asks Joy to stay and she agrees, I was wondering if that decision is really as simple as it looks on the surface. By the end of the week, Alex and Justin find themselves bonding over fatherhood, and I think there's something quietly symbolic in that. Justin stepping into the role of grandfather again, while also potentially guiding Alex through relationship and responsibility issues, feels like a passing of experience, whether anyone planned it or not. Overall, to me this week feels less like separate storylines and more like a single web tightening, where every secret, every decision, and every hidden truth starts pulling everyone closer to a breaking point. I think when I look back at Abe Carver's journey on Days of Our Lives, what stands out to me is how quietly permanent he feels. He doesn't arrive with dramatic introductions in my memory anymore. He just exists there, as if Salem has always had him built into its structure. I didn't really stop to think about when he first appeared until I remembered it was 1981, when he came in as a cop trying to do his job in a town that never stays still for long. To me, it's interesting how naturally his role expanded over time. I saw him move from working cases like the Salem Strangler investigation into leadership positions, eventually becoming police commissioner and even mayor at different points. It felt less like promotion and more like Salem repeatedly leaning on the same steady person whenever things started collapsing, whenever everything got messy. Abe was one of the few characters who felt like a stabilizing point. On a personal level, I think his story with Lexi Carver shaped a lot of how I understand him. Their relationship never stayed simple. There were secrets, betrayals, and emotional fractures that didn't heal cleanly. They even went through the devastating loss of a child they believed was theirs. And later, when Lexi eventually died at home in Abe's presence, it felt like the show stripped away one of the few constants in his life in a very final way. When I think about his children, I notice how none of those relationships came with easy answers either. With Theo Carver, the autism diagnosis in 2008 changed the entire direction of how Abe and Lexi understood parenting. It wasn't a side detail, it reshaped their emotional world and priorities. Then there was Brandon Walker, who entered Abe's life with tension, anger, and unanswered questions before the truth of their connection fully surfaced. And with Lani Price, the biological link didn't hold up in the end, but Abe still chose to adopt her, which to me says more about his character than any title or position ever could. I also keep coming back to how long James Reynolds has embodied Abe. There's something rare about a performance that stretches across decades without losing its grounding. He stepped away briefly in the early 90s, returned, and somehow re-entered the role without disruption. I think that consistency is part of why Abe doesn't feel like he belongs to one specific era of the show. He adapts, but he doesn't fracture. And of course, the character has been pushed through extreme soap opera conditions, presumed deaths, returns, health crises, temporary blindness, memory loss, and all the typical narrative upheavals that could easily redefine someone completely. But what I notice is that Abe doesn't really change in essence. He adjusts, he recovers, and he continues forward in the same steady rhythm. So when I reflect on it, I don't think Abe Carver's milestone is tied to one storyline or one dramatic turning point. It's more about endurance. Salem keeps rewriting itself, characters come and go, chaos resets everything over and over, but Abe remains. And to me, that quiet persistence is exactly what makes him one of the show's true constants.